Donald Trump will die at some point, unless we get to the point of infinite lifespan.
Welcome to Crash, the tech podcast about everything else. Today we're asking if 2026 is the year the internet finally broke, whether a massive meme reset could fix everything, and if the idea of being chronically online has finally died. I'm the chronically online Alex Hudson.
And I'm Chris Stokely-Walker. And Alex, I think 2026 was the year that your internet died, if anything is to go by.
Look, we've just spent 15 minutes trying to work out why I couldn't get a website to load. And actually, it is because my hard drive is full, because iCloud is having a moment with Tahoe. It will fix itself when Tahoe 26.2.00. Just Apple needs to fix things and make it better. It would make me want to own a PC until you try one, then they're horrible and you can't use them and they're underpowered. They don't do anything to do. Windows is a hellscape.
Well, Windows is a hellscape, but I mean, it doesn't do that, which is what I would suggest. So it is decent, and I, for my sins, stick with Windows. I think this is karma.
Really? What happened last week? I had to cut you out the first 5 minutes.
Well, that wasn't me though. That was, I think that your internet problems are karma for you making fun of the Travelodge Wi-Fi, to be perfectly honest. I think that what goes around comes around. The Travelodge gods are here to try and attack you and say that actually, you know what? Putting together some sort of internet connection is exceedingly difficult. And if you mock me, then you will have your own troubles.
This morning, you were on the Today programme, being all intelligent. I haven't listened to it, so I'm assuming you sounded intelligent. I was playing cricket against a robot this morning.
Nice. Okay. Just, yeah. I mean, that's who here is doing more of the casual name dropping. You know, I was playing cricket against a robot versus I was on the Today programme. And this is what you get for listening to Crash, the sort of learned insights of both of us. Yeah, no, I was on. My friend Sophie, who works for World Service, picked up some of what I said. It was about the induction of YouTube's video page from 2006, not from 2005 for some weird reason, but from 2006, a year after the platform kind of came into existence. Don't really know why, but it's been subsumed into the V&A's archive and is being exhibited as a kind of cultural touchstone. And so today I was talking about the impact of YouTube, and she said that I sounded incredibly posh on the radio. So I guess I was putting on my Radio 4 voice, but I was also being interviewed by Justin Webb, so I feel like just by sort of osmosis, you immediately become 20% posher just by being in his presence.
Is that news? It feels like a big news day.
It was the 10 to 9 slot that became the 20 past 8 slot that they also went to the news early because we wrapped up by 8:28. So I mean that tells you its own story. But actually I do think it is an interesting moment. There is, I think, an important recognition of actually how these things do shape our lives, and the design, the UX of the YouTube video page has had a massive impact. You know, it was kind of the equivalent of the endless scroll in the Web 2 era. And, it was an important enough a story, Alex, for me to then pitch national newspapers. Here's what else should be added to the museum archives from the tech world. And unluckily, because it is quite a big news day, nobody took the bite on that one. So unfortunately, I had to make do with an Al Jazeera interview and then going for some afternoon tea.
So it shows, what are the other things that should be in the V&A?
So I had a whole list of them. So I thought that the iPhone home screen and like the sort of skeuomorphism stuff. I thought the TikTok endless scroll was also very much worthy of it. And I had a couple of others in there, which I can dig out if you really want. But I think that this podcast might be like an hour and a half if I did, to be completely honest with you. So I had on there also... I had the Facebook like button, the Google search bar, the Tinder swipe, and the Netflix skip intro button, all of which I think actually have contributed in their own way to this sort of stuff. So if you are an editor who is listening and you want a strong day 2 story for a very weak day 1, I am always willing and able to write these stories for you.
Nothing starts a pitch better than a week. If you want something that's weaker than the week of the week, keep pitching. I mean, sounds great.
Yeah, well, this is the job of a freelancer. We have to constantly go. But you're right. It's not as if there's not a lot of news kicking about at the minute. And actually, There is an awful lot of news kicking about at the minute.
Yeah, my robot cricket was there's a company called Hits who've set up this cricket net underneath the Arches in Bethnal Green. There are other locations available, and essentially it's just you against a screen of a person running in, and it's a bowling machine, but it's all automated, it's all AI, and it's a little bit. I thought it would be a lot of fun, and it was a little bit like the world's saddest driving range. So I don't. It didn't feel very joyful. None of it was fun.
Is this any different to what you have in a cricket net situation anyway, where you have that kind of like the weird, you have like a leaf blower attached to two kind of big sanding circles, and then it kind of chucks out a cricket ball? Like, why does AI need to be involved in this in any way?
Because in your lawnmower analogy, there is still a person putting in the ball. And so they're trying to remove the human from that ball. And usually with a bowling machine, that human is a coach. And then when you flap at it and get it wrong, they can say, oh, here's why you're missing it. Whereas with this, it was just here's how hard you hit it. Here's a video replay of you looking like you can't play cricket.
But why do you need AI to put a ball into a machine? That's a robot, right? You just like, didn't we solve this with like the bowling ball mechanism? Like, on a bowling alley, you chuck it down. If you're like me, you're a pro bowler, then you get strikes every single time. Pins reset, the ball comes back up into the machine, and it is there ready for you. I don't really, this is too much AI. This is an indication.
No, you want a ball tracker. You want to see how far you're hitting it. You want to see how far you've erred. You set the field, so then you know where you're meant to be avoiding. I think AI might be doing the company a disservice. I don't know if they say AI that much, but it's all automated. It's all meant to be fancy, and it's just wasn't as fun as it should have been. I don't know.
Is it because you wanted AR glasses or goggles put on? Is that what it was? Really, you're kind of like just a massive fanboy for augmented reality, and you wanted to strap on some goggles and enter the metaverse for cricket.
Have you seen the metaverse cricket thing? That actually looks really good.
Okay, moving on. We've got a lot to talk about today.
You don't want to be part of the metaverse? Okay.
No.
So we'll start with the idea that 2026 could be the year that the internet finally broke. We're a long way from where Tim Berners-Lee's vision that the web would be for everybody, for everything, and be free. We're a lifetime away from MySpace's Tom being your first friend. It's been over a decade since the This Is Fine dog first sat down surrounded by flames. We're even over 4 years past Wordle, a game set up for an indie developer's wife was sold to the New York Times. That feels like last week, but it's proof that nothing innocent can last very long. So theft, talk, rage bait, deepfakes, the hook to meme coin, the Elon Musk in general. A YouTube lawyer saying the social network isn't a social network. A million different things, but everything feels a little bit off. Like we've just taken a wrong turn somewhere. But 2026 is meant to be the year that chronically online becomes picking up analog hobbies. A great reset where we get back to the good old days of the internet and actually going out in real life. Though the fact that we're learning about hashtag analog bags and countless other IRL encounters might just mean that analog as curated for the algorithm performative partying. So, some people have called it the logging off industrial complex. So we're going to try and make sense of whether or not I'm just too chronically online, too jaded, or I'm actually just a soothsayer who's predicting the near future as it becomes clearer. So, Chris, how are you diagnosing me and how are you diagnosing the internet?
Well, I'm chronically online and jaded as well, so heaven help us if we're going to try and navigate through this whole thing with both of our worldviews reinforcing one another. But no, I think that it's interesting that we have... Look, I think that we are at a phase where things are shifting quite significantly, and whether or not you kind of pin it to the broader developments and the warp and the weft of the web, or whether you pin it to something a little bit sort of more close to home and in recent history of a kind of shift here in terms of the evolution of AI, like I fundamentally do think that we are seeing a massive change here. Social media is going by the wayside a little bit. As we speak, I'm currently watching a live stream of the families of those who've been affected by social media addiction, as they would claim, lining up in front of California court and getting their pictures taken ahead of Mark Zuckerberg testifying in this massive trial that we're expecting any minute. And, in some ways, actually, I think part of the reason why that trial is happening is because social media is on the decline and it's now a relatively easy punching bag. But at the same time, you have this massive upheaval that we're going through in the world of AI, and not just, I suppose, being drowned in AI slop, and as you mentioned, not knowing if you're interacting with a bot or not on social media, but actually, seeing the advent of AI agents and the way that they are changing the web, sometimes closing it off. The Internet Archive is no longer necessarily archiving what it's meant to because they're worried that AI models are just using that for their training data rather than how it's meant to be used innocuously. So yeah, I do think that like something is changing. There is a rupture going on here, and quite how we end up navigating this, I'm not fully certain. I mean, have you thought about kind of where we're at, where we're going, and how we survive through that shift?
I don't. So I think the internet is a bit shit because society is a bit shit because everything is a little bit off because we have stagnated growth and there's a sort of a real clustering of wealth at the top, and while there's that conspiracy theory around everyone going through a big reset every 80 years because people's memory is only as long as the sort of average lifespan, and there's that deep unease with the sort of status quo as is, as shown by every prime minister only lasts about 3 weeks. So I think the internet has become this vehicle for that unease, and the reason that the memes come back and the reason that we obsess with nostalgia is some academics are arguing that actually it's because of the deep unsafety at the moment. People want to go back to a simpler time, which is why the whole 2016 look, here's us 10 years ago thing came around, because albeit all nostalgia is safer because it was in the past, but it's very much a case of, I don't feel safe now. I felt safer 10 years ago. The internet feels like there's just that undercurrent of something. And it's probably the algorithms, and it's probably big tech, and it's probably the AI apocalypse, and all of the above. But I can't put my finger on what's wrong, only that something doesn't feel quite right.
Yeah. That's difficult. So I don't know really how we get through that. And one of the problems I think that we're having is there's a lot of reactionary responses to this. So to answer your follow-up question that you didn't even get around to asking, but you kind of flagged it. So the Internet Archive, effectively, a huge repository of information on the web. It is vitally important. It's something that people have advocated for a long time. When it was coming under a DDoS attack, even less than a year ago now, there was this huge outpouring of reaction saying that we need to cherish, we need to praise, we need to kind of protect this massive Library of Alexandria for the digital era. It turns out now, some of those news organizations that were writing stories about how we need to protect that are choosing to opt out of being archived in many ways. So there was a story by Neiman Lab, which talked about how The Guardian has kind of opted out of the Internet Archive's APIs. It reduces the number of pages that are allowed to be trawled by the Wayback Machine, which is kind of the way in which we look at web pages and how they change over time. Vitally important resource for journalism, by the way, because it means that you can see how, for instance, companies' terms and conditions change, or their privacy policies, or something like that. And they're not the only ones. The FT blocks any bot, including the Internet Archive's bot, from scraping their information. I think the New York Times has also said it's hard blocking the Internet Archive's crawlers since around about the end of last year. The worry basically is that AI companies that are already stopped from coming in the front door of these websites through the robot.txt file that appears on most websites nowadays, that says, if you're an OpenAI web crawler, if you're an Anthropic web crawler, if you're a Google web crawler, then you can take a hike. You're not coming in here. They had previously been letting in the Internet Archives because they saw it as a benefit. But actually now they're worried that those companies that are blocked through the front door are choosing to try and find another way around through the Internet Archive.
My other follow-up was social media. So what happens when social media isn't really social?
Yeah.
What the hell comes after? I believe in Web3. I think it's really going to change the world, and then no one else does.
But what impact would I don't understand how the features and the benefits of Web3 would have an impact that would mean social media. I don't understand how you layer social media into that. And truthfully, that's certainly not my area of expertise. I kind of took a decision 3 or 4 years ago. I did cover loads of NFT stuff, and I thought that was kind of interesting, but a little bit rug pully. And then, truthfully, I decided, you know what, I'm going to opt out of large parts of the Web3 aspect. So, you, truthfully, Alex, are probably better placed to answer that question than I am. So, what's your grand thinking on?
I mean, everyone opted out of NFTs about 2 or 3 years ago. So I think I've just spent $1,000 on this monkey GIF. Like, oh God, what happened to you?
I went to
Finally, the blockchain browser won for that brief period.
I went to when I went to Las Vegas, we had a little sojourn to downtown Las Vegas. So not just Fremont Street, which is like the big bit where all of the Fremont Street, by the way. Have you ever been to Las Vegas?
No, my little brother got married there,
Okay.
but I wasn't. It was in COVID, a long story. But no, I really, really want to go. I really want to go play the World Series of Poker. That's on my bucket list of life.
Okay, so the strip is brilliant. Strip I really like. You have to go in thinking, being kind of like semi-ironic on it because it is just like adult Disney World, and that's fine. But then
Disney World is adult Disney World. Don't be taking Disney World out.
True, very true. But downtown Las Vegas kind of divides into two various areas. So there's one that is Fremont Street, which is kind of it's the old casinos and this kind of massive neon awning that protects the main street and has kind of like buskers playing and live stages and stuff like that. And truthfully, it's like the worst place on earth. It's just too loud, it's really dirty, it's grimy, it's kind of seedy and not very nice. Then there is like a growing area where you have like lots of really trendy stuff, and there was in that area a really nice kind of street food market and things like that, like indie artist spaces. But within that, the NFT bros had polluted that space. There was an NFT gallery where you could actually go and look at Bored Apes and other things like that that cost supposedly millions of dollars, but were just these really ugly, horrible depictions that were just put up on walls and inside frames and treated as if they were modern day Picassos. And it was the best place to go with just a huge arched eyebrow and go, this is shit, isn't it?
What was that story? It was Logan Paul or Jake Paul, one of the Pauls sold a trading card for a surprisingly large amount of money. And that feels like NFTs has morphed into the sort of trading card, TikTokification of Pokemon cards and all this such stuff. How much did the one Paul sell it for? Anyway,
Logan Paul and an obscene amount of money, but actually, there is a suggestion that it might have been overly graded. That's another fascinating subculture that we ought to look at one time, actually, is the idea of like grading memorabilia and who goes into that and how do you kind of decide what is a 9.0 Pokemon card versus an 8.2 Pokemon card and the difference in value between those.
Which one you should put in the V&A?
Yeah, well, exactly. So YouTube is in the V&A, which is a very nice thing to happen. But, Pokemon cards, maybe not quite yet.
So in answer to your question about 5 minutes ago, what happens to Web3? I think the difficulty with Web3 that is it cannot readily be monetized. So if you're doing many to many, and if you're micro-fragmenting based on niches and you're giving people more and more agency over who they talk to and their data, suddenly you see that the power of data as a marketing tool no longer exists, as Blue Sky is finding out. You lose the one-to-many virality element because you can't share. If people don't want their shares going on beyond a certain circle, they won't. Or they have limitations over their own algorithms and they can manipulate their own algorithms and they have more agency in those spaces. So that means that the viral moments and those sort of 1 million people saw this vanishes. And those closed communities, as WhatsApp has found out, don't take well to advertising. And as ChatGPT found out in the Super Bowl ads that Anthropic ran, there is that thing that if you think you're having a private conversation, or if you think you're in this closed community, the second you put ads on it, that's when that comes in. As far as sort of the Web3 more broadly and all the blockchain stuff, I think all the blockchain chat that we had 3 or 4 years ago about how it definitely changing everything and Bitcoin was going to be the most wonderful thing. And Bitcoin is now just an asset class that you hold and no one really understands what it does. And you can buy some chips in Venezuela or some microstate somewhere. You can buy a pint of beer with Bitcoin. So again, that adds to the unease of the web. Like, this was the great future, the decentralizing and the full data democracy was happening, and that isn't there yet. And that feels strange because we're in this odd bit of neither one nor the other.
It's interesting, and there's the idea of the blockchain in Web3. I think I'm much more skeptical on it than perhaps a lot of people are. I think a lot of people are already skeptical on it. But I had a conversation with the CEO of Circle. I don't think I'm allowed to say why I did, but it'll be for stories that are coming out in the future, in months to come. I will tell you when I'm allowed to. But it was interesting. He was talking about, they had a huge IPO last year, massively oversubscribed. And basically the whole thing that they want to do is they want to create like a US digital currency, and are kind of like trying to bring crypto, blockchain-based cryptocurrencies into the mainstream by tethering them to the US dollar, or kind of providing some sort of digital facsimile of it. And there is an interesting development going on in the US with the Genius Act, which was passed, which was basically Donald Trump is very crypto first. He wants this to happen. He has created the regulatory environment to do it and is going all in. He wants to be the main crypto president, but actually an equal and opposite response to Donald Trump, because of the way that he is so unreliable. We've seen this week a movement by UK banks, by UK finance, by European Union organizations also, to try and cut out some of those traditional money movers like Visa and MasterCard, because there is a worry that we are overly reliant on the US for these sorts of things. That kind of centralized US reliant tech stack that we've talked about in the past covers all different areas, including kind of offline payments. And really fascinatingly, in the last couple of days, the European Parliament, who have always been quite sort of skeptical on the idea of digital currencies and a digital euro, have basically given their assent to go ahead with the development of this. And I think it's kind of been given an impetus in response to the unreliability of Donald Trump. I know we've strayed a long way from social media here and talking about this, Alex, but I think that the Web3 moment is still living and very much becoming a little bit more of a live discussion in kind of the corridors of power.
The big final question on this is, when you talk about massive but opposite forces, is Donald Trump the unstoppable force or the immovable object?
Is that not the question to which there are no answers? I think that he's an unstoppable force and an immovable object. Although if you look at his hands, and there are endless armchair speculators on X who get very excited every couple of weeks, every time they see a new bruise or a blemish on Donald Trump's hand. So, yeah, 2028 or beyond, I think, is what we're waiting for.
Can we predict Trump's death? Is that allowed?
Donald Trump will die at some point, unless we get to the point of infinite lifespan, in which case, and Peter Diamandis is in Trump's circle. We have a lot of people in the Trump White House who are kind of in that belief that actually infinite lifespan is possible. So it's a matter of time.
In part 2, there will be some actual news, so that you have to look forward to. We'll be back in 1 minute. Welcome back, and we promised news. And Prime Minister Keir Starmer has announced, well, we're recording this before he announces it, but we're good journalists. And there's a press release. But we're serious journalists. It will announce at 10 p.m. last night that tech firms will have to take down abusive images within 48 hours under a new law to protect women and girls. Starmer said the online world is the front line of the 21st century battle against women and girls. That's why my government, his government, is taking urgent action against chatbots and nudification tools. So essentially that means that creating or sharing non-consensual intimate images will become a priority offence under the Online Safety Act. So This will, the government says, mean the crime is treated with the same seriousness as child abuse or terrorism. That's in the release. Chris, is deep faking as serious a crime as child abuse and terrorism?
Depends on what type of deepfake, because if it's a deepfake of a child in a sexual position, then yes, it absolutely is. If it is a deepfake of something that is going to incite racial hatred or inspire some sorts of terroristic actions, then yes. But I think a lot of this stuff probably not quite as much as you might fear or think. And yeah, I mean, it is an interesting announcement. I can speak confidently with the benefit of talking hours ahead of this actually happening and hours ahead of the podcast releasing, that it is being overhyped enormously by the government. So Keir Starmer is going to be talking to the BBC about this tomorrow morning, and it's going to be a big deal. There's a lot of hoopla around it. It is significant, but it's worth kind of taking a step back, looking a little bit, not cynically, but skeptically at this sort of stuff. And it's interesting. I was talking to my students about how you should approach kind of people claiming world-changing developments or saying that their business is going great guns or whatever it is. That is fine and dandy, and the government will say that this is a massive thing that they are doing and it's welcomed. But I also don't think it is kind of world-changing. So if we look, for instance, at the 48-hour timeline, Germany has something similar for particularly terroristic content. So under its rules, if you breach its kind of very strict guidelines on hate speech and inciting hatred amongst one another, because of Germany's history and background around this sort of stuff, they act very quickly on this and require tech companies take stuff down incredibly speedily. So in that way, we're not kind of being world leading or interesting on that. But is this a good thing? Yes. Is this something that you need to be kind of championing and saying from the outset that this is kind of world changing and it's kind of tackling terror or something like that in the same way that they are? No, probably not. This is important, but not that important.
How is it? How much of a change is it? Because it feels like they are announcing a thing that, in the broadest terms, is already covered within existing criminal action, or am I not understanding the legalese of actually how different this is?
So it's the timescale that is different. So previously, and we kind of saw this, I suppose, with the Grok situation. Through the crime and policing bill, or through the Online Safety Act, whichever one you want to look at, you effectively had to take stuff down, but there wasn't a compulsion in terms of the timescale. So there wasn't a clock ticking over that, which meant that you had people like Elon Musk, who in the instance with Grok earlier this year was saying, oh, well, I'll take my own sweet time to do it. And actually that doesn't have consequences. Now, I think probably the challenge is that there is an argument to be made that acting quickly is good. But also, I think that the way in which this is being hyped as a game changer is perhaps a little bit ignorant of how the web works. And the reality is that if something is out there, you cannot really ever undo it, even though the Internet Archive's abilities are being weakened, as we learned before the break. Because actually, even just 48 minutes, frankly, even 48 seconds of a video existing online or an image existing online is enough time for that to be downloaded and re-uploaded and shared in any way that is possible by those who want to do so. So, I think that is a difference from what has gone before, and I think it's the time scale and particularly the kind of massive stick that is being wielded. So something, I think it's like 10% of global turnover of a sort of parent company or anything like that, or having your service blocked in the UK is the consequence of this. But this is one of those kind of bits of government action that sounds really good on the BBC in the morning, as you have probably heard by now. And if you're listening to Five Live, then you've probably heard me talking about it.
Have you already been booked for tomorrow morning?
Well, yes, I have. So, but I haven't had anything confirmed, but they said that they were, yeah. So that will be interesting to see what happens. I hope that they book me and confirm it quicker so that I actually know whether I have to get up at yon time in the morning for 6:05 to talk to them or not. But, it sounds good on the BBC, but actually I think when you take a little bit more of a scrutinizing look at it, you realize, well, good, but not kind of world changing.
I think if I hear, I'm not going to be up at 6:05 tomorrow morning, but if I hear the 48 hours, 48 minutes, 48 seconds thing on 5 Live before this podcast goes out, will sort of invoice them for theft, because it's a lovely line. I enjoyed it, but it feels like that was the one that you already worked on and you're already going to be speaking to 5 Live tomorrow.
Alex, we've already gone through my process for this podcast and any other broadcast appearance that I make. I start talking and my brain catches up with my mouth. I genuinely do not know this. I haven't even thought of this before I sent it to you 10 minutes before we started recording this. So, no, it's really not a pre-prepared line.
He's a professional, everybody.
Yeah,
he's such a professional. I just don't see how they're conflating it with child abuse or terrorism. I understand.
Go on, sorry.
I understand, like, at some points, if it is child abuse, then it is child abuse. I understand that, and that is its own crime already, and anyone doing that with children is, of course, horrific. But when it comes to terrorism, I don't understand how someone committing an act based on a doctrine or based on a religious belief or based on the idea of changing regime or whatever that, albeit that the governments around the world are changing the definitions of terrorism every week now, as the High Court most recently has just told them they cannot do anymore. But it feels like the sorts of thing that is like, of course, it's a terrible thing. This is nuanced. It is an offence. It is a thing that should never happen. But it is a thing that ultimately you are giving a lot of publicity to and headlines to for what could just be it's such a blurry line of what there's that thing that there's going to be such big headlines and sort of, and the nudification line and all of that sort of stuff, and it doesn't really warrant that level of scrutiny, that level of front page headlines probably tomorrow morning.
Yeah, and I think that is an indication of the still massive gulf, although it is improving, between kind of tech literate tech press and mainstream coverage of technology, which unfortunately is still not necessarily grappling with some of the more nuanced issues. And I think that's really the thing that is important, is that you need people who are subject matter experts who can kind of sift between what is and isn't important. You can say, yeah, like the government is telling you that this is amazing and world changing, but actually, is it? Is there actually that significant a difference between what we believe might happen and what the government is saying is happening? And if there is, what do we mean about that, and what do we think about that kind of a little bit more, again, not cynically, but a little bit more just skeptically, and a little bit more, it's an argument for being jaded is what I would say, and we are both jaded on this.
Maybe the optimistic, less jaded version is, how long did it take the government to fully outlaw upskirting as its own separate crime? And that took campaigns from journalists and for those directly affected of it to make it a separate entity, and because it was such a violation of privacy, because it was such a heinous. How do you I've spent too long in America. Heinous act that took too long to act upon. So maybe actually the optimistic view is this is a thing that is directly impacting women and girls, and they're getting ahead of this before it has become this fully blown thing, or at least before it has become this mainstream accepted thing that everyone knows about is happening in the press. So actually, let's be optimistic about it. The preventative measure of this legislation is a good thing, even if it is wildly overstating the potential risk, the potential criminality of what is actually happening.
Yeah, but then you have to bring in the political element of this, which is a Labour government that is struggling to cut through, struggling, frankly, even to just do the basic core competencies of governing, and is facing an unofficial opposition that is declaring itself the official opposition in the face of reform Like, this is why they are talking so tough on this, even if actually the reality is much more nuanced. And it's kind of a shame that we're at that point, but you can kind of understand it. It's just that, we live in this weird world at the minute where we need to automatically try and tamp down several steps what these people are saying to get to the reality of what's actually going on.
So we're going to move swiftly on. We're going to jump straight into a thing. We'll be back in 1 minute, maybe. Welcome back. So, as I'm sure you have read, or if you're in America, you'll have watched on CNN, because this man has been everywhere. So, the AI startup founder Matt Schumer. So he's written an essay called "Something Big Is Happening" that has gone mega viral, and he's sort of comparing how we're thinking about AI to how we were thinking about COVID-19 in February 2020. So every expert knew what was coming, but the world didn't. And so over the course of about 3 weeks, the entire world changed, Schumer writes. Your office closed, your kids came home, and life rearranged itself into something you wouldn't have believed if you'd have described it to yourself a month earlier. I think we're in the "this seems overblown" phase of something much bigger than COVID. So he goes on to say that the next 2 to 5 years are going to be disorientating in ways most people aren't prepared for. We're past the point where this is an interesting dinner conversation about the future. The future is already here. It just hasn't knocked on your door yet. It's about to. So I have chatted about this essay with a lot of people, and it's 50-50 split. So my more tech sort of futuristy sort of people are actually, yeah, it's entirely right. No further questions. He's saying what everyone is thinking. The other half have written at some point in capital letters about just how idiotic this person is. I can guess which side of the fence you're on, Chris, but what are you making of that essay?
Well, what side of the fence do you think I'm on? Let's start with that.
I think you're riding the fence, this beautiful sort of mid American fence, into journalistic credibility, and you're going to take some points that are fine and some points that aren't fine, and you're going to do a good journalistic job of providing balance.
How did you know that? That is exactly what I think. I think that there is a really valid point that he has. I think that it is overstated, and yeah, he spent too much time on X where you're just being bombarded with these supposedly game-changing transformational ways in which Claude code or whatever is rewriting people's lives, or OpenClaw, or whatever you want to think about. And I do ascribe to that a little bit. Like, I am seeing massive changes in my life, in the way that I am working, in the way that I'm being more efficient through the use of agentic AI. And so I think that is correct. But then also I do have to bear in mind that this is someone who has previously talked about sort of massive transformational leaps that have not necessarily come to fruition. And I think that is the thing that we need to bear in mind here. So, yeah, I think that there is a germ of reality in what he's saying. And I do think that there will be significant shifts. I just don't think that it's kind of like as world changing as COVID, or as immediate and kind of like pre AD and post AD, sort of before and after worlds that he's kind of claiming it is to be. This is someone who has spent a lot of time, if we were talking about this 6 months ago, we would have said that this person is suffering from AI psychosis, potentially. That's unfair to him because he's not. But there are some people who are seeing the face of God in this sort of stuff. It's not there yet, but also it's far away from the more cynical people who are looking at AI and commenting on AI, who say this is just a stochastic parrot. It's not that either. And the reality is it is somewhere in between, probably closer to his opinion, closer to his, something big is happening here moment, than those who are really cynical, but certainly like nowhere near 100% towards his direction.
In brainstorming for Crashed each week, I often ask an AI, for which will remain nameless for sake of having to give them just how shit it was. And they recommended that we talked about the delays to the launch of the Switch 2 because of industrial problems with some of the chips. So, I mean, I think there is some way to go. And the point in the essay raised that actually, if I'm saying that, it just means that I'm not using the most up-to-date model. and I'm not prompting it correctly, and there's so much stuff going on behind the scenes that actually means that this is more advanced than I would give it credit for, I reckon I'm probably at a, a sort of polite estimate. I'm in the top 10% of understanding how AI is going to work. So I would hope that I'm better than most at prompting. So I think he's right. I don't think it's 2 to 5 years. I think it's 5 to 10 years. I think there will be that moment where who's the head of Microsoft AI who says that actually any jobs primarily using a screen will be entirely unnecessary within 12 to 18 months. But I feel like I've heard that for the last 12 to 18 months. And then again, another 12 to 18 months before it. I've said it on a podcast at one point because I took the red pill, the blue pill, the black pill, whatever pill means you've drunk the Kool-Aid on it. And so I can see where it is going. I just think the timelines are unnecessarily optimistic because everyone is trying to pretend that this AI bubble. Yes, of course, that Anthropic really is worth, what is it, 400 billion in the latest funding round. OpenAI is just closing at 800 billion valuations on a new funding round. And actually, some people I've spoken to said that is the highest it's going to go. So actually, those investors can end up losing money. But I don't know how. It feels like that essay will come back and be this sort of historical artifact of just the overblown hype of AI and what then became of this more moderated view, or this soothsaying thing that we look back on in generations and it becomes Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or it becomes Asimov's laws, or it becomes one of these things that actually signified what was to come. And then his point will be entirely right, that actually we were on the cusp of something and we just ignored it.
Yeah, no, I think it's not going to be a soothsayer's guarantee of what's happening. I think it is a little bit boy cried wolf. Not that it's not going to be significant, but just that some of the overreaches that we're seeing at the minute are people finding this absolutely fascinating, absolutely enthralling, and trying to play around with it, a new paradigm of how they can interact with an AI, which is a really significant moment. But also, the more that you play around with it, you also realize that there are limitations and issues. So, I'm running a Claude Code instance at the minute, which is throwing up loads of errors, and it keeps recurring those errors. So, I have to kind of think about, okay, well, what do we do here? How do we kind of solve that problem? And so, we're not there yet. I think that, the timeline might be a little bit stretched. It could happen a little bit further out than perhaps he is saying. And I also think that, where he's saying these enormous things will change, maybe dial it back by 20-30%. And the reality is that it will be disruptive, it will be world changing, it will be important. And so, we shouldn't discount it entirely, but we should, I think, say, actually, this is a kind of point to argue against and knock down. And it's a good kind of straw man to think about rather than necessarily a roadmap for where we're going.
The way you solve it is with the Alex Hudson Accuracy Protocol, or ACAP, as ChatGPT invented for me the other day because I was getting so angry about it. Like, this is not citable. This is nonsense. This is garbage. Fix it. And so they developed that for me, and then they ignored it for the next 3 prompts that were absolute garbage. And so we should probably come on to the questions to which there are no answer to, because you have to be on TV and you have to be interviewed for TV in 6 minutes, right?
Yeah, something like that.
So we're going to do this super snap. My question to which there is no answer. Why is search still growing? It was meant to die. How is it still posting results? That means it is still number of people searching, the number of searches are still increasing.
Because it's got AI in, right? I mean, that is one of the things. It's not necessarily that search is actually growing. There's a difference between searching and then actually clicking through and seeking the information that you were looking for. I would suggest that perhaps search referrals might be declining, but the use of search engines is maintaining the same levels or increasing because they are starting to borrow some of the stuff that is the trendy new technology of AI answers into them. So maybe that is the reason why, although that's just too clean an answer for the sort of stuff that we do at the end of this one, right?
Well, no, if there is an answer to the question, I don't think there's an answer to. I mean, just maybe that's, why is there a question? Why is there an answer to the answer to which the question there is no answer to? I can't say that at all. That's gibberish. Right. Go.
My one for you is a difficult one because we still haven't had Mark Zuckerberg appearing in front of this court case. What do you think will be the outcome of this trial? Will social media platforms end up being brought to heel? Is this the end of social media as we know it?
So it is not the end of social media as we know it. Unequivocally not. I think there will be a lot of strong words. I think it is telling that both TikTok and Snap settled, which implies there is a tail to wag, a dog to bark, whatever the hell that there is a there. But the fact that they can call Zuckerberg, the fact they can get the CEOs in, they can get Messarian, they can talk about all these things means that they are taking it seriously. And chances are there is something that will change. But I think enforcing whatever that nuanced legislation would, there'll be some caveats, there'll be buts, there'll be ands, there'll be if this but not that. There'll be so much in it that means that what actually happens will be. I think the ruling will be key to some number of caveats in it, but what the legislation becomes after that will be way more important. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that it's fascinating that we've got this far, to be honest. Lots of people have tried to land lots of lawsuits on social media platforms in the past. I'm not really sure what it is that makes this one have got quite so far, because you have two major companies, Meta and Alphabet, the parent company of YouTube, being brought in front of a case here. You have other companies that have settled, obviously without claiming any responsibility or fault or issues there in advance of the trial. I'm just intrigued as to what exactly made them choose to do that and what made the two companies that hold out. It kind of, a lot of these sort of trials, you feel like they're not going to pin anything on anyone. With this one, there's a little bit more uncertainty, I would suggest. I'm not really sure what comes out of this, and that's what makes me want to watch it quite so closely.
Well, it's expected to run, I think, until at least the middle of March, likely the end of March. So we will no doubt have a full discussion, ideally with some sort of tech lawyer, and actually what that means in practice for whenever we find out the verdict.
Indeed. Looking forward to it.
All right. So before Chris is on TV, what is happening in 3 minutes or 4 minutes or?
YouTube's V&A thing again.
How is this run as a story for so long? I don't wish to critique your brilliant journalism at all times. Of course, it's not a story.
I will be on TV talking about it in 3 minutes.
Then we better get on with this quick. Crash is Everything Popular is Wrong Production. Follow us on all your favourite podcast platforms. The title music is from Nuff. Check them out on all the streamers. We're hosted by Aircast, assisted by Riverside Studios, and we are published every Thursday morning. If you want to get in touch, do so. We still haven't got an email. We should do. But you can find me at Alex Hurds, ALEXHEDS, on everywhere. Follow Chris on X at Stokel, STOKEL. All the links is there. He'll be on telly in about 4 seconds. Go to crash.substack.com if you want to support the podcast or read anything we're working, and we will see you next week.